Watch a movie, get inspired, give back, help a charity. It's time for a movie karma watch party.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jared Milrad. I'm the founder of Movie Karma. We are a community globally that helps to connect inspiring creators, creatives, filmmakers, and others who care about social impact, inclusion, and diversity to make the world a better place. And so today I'm really excited to have another conversation with an amazing creative, an amazing person who's passionate about social change and impact. Iris McAlpin, who's a certified trauma coach and does a lot of amazing work around mental health and well-being. So Iris, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. So we have lots of questions for you, as you know, but to start off, would love to just learn a little bit more about your background. We're always curious how people got into doing what they do today. So if you could share a little bit about that, that'd be a great place to start.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm a trauma coach and I work with complex trauma, self-sabotage, and eating disorders primarily. And I'm sure like many people in the mental health field, I got interested in this because I struggled with mental health quite a bit. I experienced a lot of trauma in my early life and tried a million different things. You know, I was in therapy for a long time. I was fortunate enough to be able to do that, but it still wasn't really working that well. And so I became sort of hell-bent on discovering what was going on with me and understanding what was causing all these symptoms that I was having, which eventually led me down the path to find out more about trauma. And once I started understanding that more, all of these pieces started like clicking into place and completely changed my life. And so I've dedicated my life to educating about that and then helping people through their own process as well.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds obviously incredibly relevant and important. I think that you had that personal journey. I'm sure that helps you work with your clients and others around these issues. Could you talk a little bit about when we say the word trauma, curious like sort of how you would define that term? Because I think knowing a bit about you and talking before, it sounds like that's a bit broader than perhaps some people might initially think of it.
This is one of my favorite questions because a lot of people think of war or violence or like catastrophic car accidents, these kinds of things as trauma, but trauma is, you know, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk talks about it as an experience that overwhelms our coping capacities. So anytime you feel like you're kind of in over your head, you don't have the proper coping strategies or tools to get through something, that would be considered trauma. And then Dr. Eric Gentry defines it as an experience encoded in terror. And so that, again, you know, might make you think of life or death situations, but in childhood, a lot of things can be terrifying if we don't really know what's going on, especially like super early in life. There's a lot of things that can be quite overwhelming and quite scary. And so we tend to minimize those things, but they absolutely do have an impact on us as we're developing.
Right. And so I'm sure a lot of the work you do is to bring those to the fore and name them and talk about them. Could you, since we work a lot in the area of social impact and inclusion, as you I'm sure well know, there's obviously different experiences with trauma depending on the person and what their experience in life is, whether that's because of their race or their gender or their sexual orientation or gender identity, et cetera. Could you talk a little bit about how social stigma and discrimination play into people's different experiences with trauma and how different types of folks are walking around with different types of trauma?
This is so important. I'm really happy you're asking these kinds of questions because a lot of people don't realize that oppression is trauma, racism is trauma. So if you're in a gender identity that isn't, you know, on a checkbox on most forms, or if you're not heterosexual or white, you know, these are things that absolutely have an impact on your stress response system. Because if you're born into a world that marginalizes you and oppresses you, that's traumatic. There's no other way to describe that. But because it's normal, a lot of people don't recognize it as such. And so, you know, most people that have those experiences are coming in with like a higher baseline of stress, and prolonged stress has the same impact on your body as trauma. And so if you've been, you know, in poverty or any of these like long-term stressful experiences, we respond to just as we would, maybe not exactly the same way, but very similarly to we would like a life or death threatening situation.
Right. Yeah. I think of, you know, my friends who are either of color, or I have a friend who recently came out as trans, who, you know, felt like she was living in essentially the wrong body for her whole life, through her mid 30s. And so I think that's such a helpful way to think about it more broadly and contextually, depending on the person.
Hey everybody, I'm Jared Milrad, the founder of Movie Karma. Thanks so much for stopping by our page. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share this channel with your friends and family so we can continue to transform entertainment into action.